Yes, great, excellent. Hi, some of you I know, happy to see you here. Happy to see so many of you. I am excited to kick this off. We're going to be talking today about speeds in fiction and scene writing. And as we get into the second half, I'm definitely going to leave some time for Q&A, and also we should have some time to look at some of your writing. So if you have a few sentences or a paragraph that you think is something that you'd like to share, have that ready because we'll look at some of those in the second half. Sound good? Good. Um, so I'm Seth Harwood. I coach at Write with Seth. Um, I have a little bit of a presentation here to give you guys on the speed of story, how pacing keeps readers turning pages. One of the main things that we're going to connect with here is, a talk about how writers connect with readers. A lot of what I see with the writers who I coach and the people who come to fiction writing are the challenges of getting what's in your head onto the page and onto the page in a way that the reader can imagine something similar in their head. So I'm going to share a few resources today with you. If you'd like to sign up to get those and get my newsletter, use this code. Thanks, Leora. Use this code, writewithseth.com/sign up, or this QR code will work for you as well. Um, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is pacing and speeds. And so there's two concepts that I want to start out with. Also, I'll say that this material comes from a book by Jane Allison, and I'm going to share a PDF of that with you guys afterward. The book is called Meander, Spiral, Explode, and it's about different ways of structuring fiction. And she got some of these ideas from Henry James and people named Gerard Genette, Seymour Chapman, and also Brian Richardson. So, just to give you a sense about all of those folks, uh, there's a lot of research that's been done in this and discussions of it in a subject called narrative dynamics, which I haven't studied a lot as a fiction writer, but it probably I should. So, there's two concepts here. One is story time. That's how long an event takes in a story. So, for example, we've been on this call for 7 minutes. This is the amount of story time that we've gone through. And then the next piece is text time. So if I were to write about this, I could write about what's happened so far in this session in 2 sentences, or I could write about it in 2 pages. And that's an example of how text time can alternate or expand and increase or decrease. And the concept here is that if you think of these two, there's a ratio that makes sense where you take story time and divide it by text time. I know a lot of us are not necessarily math folks, so just hold these math concepts very lightly. But basically, like the story time, 7 minutes divided by the text time is either going to show you if I do 7 minutes in 2 sentences, it's a really big number over a very small number. So that's going to be really fast, high level speed or pace. And then if I do 7 minutes over 2 pages or 7 pages, the number is going to be a lot smaller. So we're just thinking about speed or pace going up and down. And the reason why I think this is important, oh, I see people in the chat that love math. Good. So the reason why this is important is because we can look at the different paces that folks write with, particularly when we start out or when writers start out with their fiction project. And what I'll tell you is these things down here. Um, let's see if I can highlight these. Well, these things down here, like scene, dilation, pause, these really connect with readers in a way that where the reader has more to take in, more to connect with, it's slower, and there's more detail for the reader to connect with. And ideally, I think we want to have a lot of our book here in scene time. Scene time is the thing that really makes writing strong and connect with readers. I know a lot of us are not necessarily Henry James fans, but and he was writing a long time ago, so his pace was really slow comparatively to what we see now. And so I feel like for me, if I'm worried about getting too slow, Henry James is like the guy that I don't want to become. But his concept of using scene, as Jane Allison talks about, is like scene is a concept that we've stolen from drama, and it lets a writer portray an incident so that a reader almost sees it. That's what happens when we go into scene time, is that the reader can see the scene and imagine it in their head. Ideally, it goes beyond words on the page and to a series of images that a reader can see like a movie in their mind. And then after the scene is over, the curtain can drop and we can jump to whatever and have things like summary or gap. But the reason I bring this up and think this is so important is that a lot of what I see with early writers, a lot of people who come to me as a writing coach or who start taking my classes, what I see really early on is they're coming to this with, let's see if I can make a square here. Probably not. But what I see is they're coming to the basic writing that they're doing, and the speed is often here in the summary zone. And so, what I do with folks is often to try to take them from their baseline being summary, which is fast, which is often driven by two things. One is either they're afraid of boring their readers, so they want to go really fast because they think that's what James Patterson or Michael Crichton or other best selling authors have done. Or they're just afraid to slow down, or also because they don't know how to write in scene. Like the writing in scene part is hard. And so this is part of the hard work that we need to do to really start to engage with readers. But I think if writers can recognize that they're writing in summary, then they can slow down, get more relaxed on the page, ideally. That's going to build reader confidence. And readers are going to become more invested in the story and more invested in the characters. One of the things that I tell my clients and students a lot is that for me, as a reader, to care about a character, I need to be able to see that character and see that character doing things. So when I see things in real time, in scene, that's when I start to care about the character and get invested in the story. So, summary, let's just go over these. Scene time is when text time is the same as story time. So that would be like if I took the best 3 minutes out of this presentation, or the best 3 minutes out of last night's softball game, and I put that into a 3 minute scene, then it's like here's the moment where the softball game really turned in the bottom of the seventh inning to 7 inning game. And this is exactly what happened. So I'm going to stretch that out so that it seems like, as a reader, page time is the same as story time. So you're not going to take 20 minutes to read the 20-minute half inning, but it's going to feel like it's happening at the same pace. And summary would be like, I could say, the very fast version of summary would be like, we started out, we were up 2 runs, and the other team got a bunch of hits and won the game. That's a really fast summary. And I could slow it down a little bit, but it's still going to be sort of where little text is much story time. And then ultimately, the fastest way we can go is gap. And so that's an example where we have a chapter break at the end of a scene, and then the next scene or the next chapter picks up like 2 days later or something like that. And it says 2 days later. And so there's a gap, and we've just like covered it with a few words. On the other end of things, dilation and pause can be really strong because this is where things really slow down, not only for the reader, but specifically for the character. And so I really love to get into dilation and show writers how to get into dilation, because this is when something important is happening for the character. Have you ever experienced the kind of thing where something is going on in your life? We've all experienced where something is going on and it feels like time is stretching out. Like I can see this moment around me. I notice the flowers, I notice the light, I notice what's going on in the air around me. And these are sort of high stress or high excitement moments in our lives sometimes. Sometimes things do go by really fast because we're so excited, but other times, like we have that moment of clarity, and that's when things slow down. And to be able to control that as a writer, that's going to enable your reader to really connect with the character being present instead of sort of scattered and up in their head, and connect with the character's emotion. Because those moments where things are happening like that, that's when we really feel. And things are happening that let us know or can let the reader know what's going on internally with a character, not just in a way that's thoughts, but in a way that's like feelings. And that's one of the things that I really hope to achieve in my writing, is to connect with a reader in a way that the reader can feel the character's feelings. Now, beyond dilation, where we get even slower, is pause. And this is where there's a lot of text and like no story time. The example that Jane Allison gives, I don't know if you guys have read it, but there's a story by Tobias Wolff called Bullet in the Brain, where the main character gets killed, someone shoots him, and in the moment that the bullet is passing from like his forehead to his brain and killing him, there's a whole extended sequence inside of his head of all his memories, and it's kind of like his life is flashing before his eyes, and he focuses on this baseball game that happened when he was really young, and his initial connection with the language around the baseball game, all these things. But the goal is here to be able to use all of these things. And dilation and pause are really higher level. These are more advanced techniques. But initially, for the first steps in your writing journey, the real goal is to be able to move from summary into scene and know that you're in scene work as you're writing. Let me know if that makes sense to you out there in the chat. The big idea that I want to land here is that often we wind up, or new writers start out writing in summary, and what we really want to see is that you can recognize when you're in summary and then actually figure out how to get into scene, stay in scene consistently, and then as you get into scene, control when you're going to summary or gap or actually dilation. So yeah, it's like boots on the ground. Flashbacks can happen in scene or summary, but the thing with flashbacks is that you have to know when you're making a transition to one of those things. So let's look at an example. Here is some writing that I got from one of my clients, someone who I worked with and who took my class. I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So, first she starts off, I met Eddie when we were both 10 years old. All his hair fell out when he was 13. So, how long did it take for all of his hair to fall out? Months? A whole year? And this year happens in one sentence. So, that's like really summary. This is high end, fast summary. I sat behind him in homeroom. I saved the strands that covered my desk. This probably took less time, but it's still covering like, I don't know how much of the year when she was sitting behind him. His doctor said it was too much sugar. His mother said it was too much self pleasuring. Plunged the toilet. Eddie told his mother it was Charlotte, his older sister, who threw wads of toilet paper down there. Maybe that's not summary. Maybe that's one specific piece of dialogue or conversation that he had with his mother. But it's winding up in a whole bunch of summary. So this paragraph really feels like a lot of Eddie and a lot of the narrator's life is going by really fast. His sister was testing out eyeliners and lipsticks. I think he might have made that up, but it was true that the plumber's truck was frequently in front of their house. So there's a lot of telling here. And I think summary comes across as telling because it's covering a lot of Eddie's life and the narrator's life in a very short amount of time, sometimes sentences. But here we've got a paragraph that really tells us a lot about what happened in this year in their lives. So let's look at the rewrite. I fell in love with Eddie on the school playground during recess. Maybe this is still summary. We don't know how many recesses this was, but we're getting closer to scene work. We were both 10 years old and the tallest kids in the class. Want to race? Want to have a race on the monkey bars? He asked. Now, when we get to dialogue, dialogue is always in scene because we know that scene time is like story time because we're actually hearing what the characters hear and what the characters say. So we've ended up in scene time here when we hit dialogue. How do you want to do it? I asked. We each start from the opposite side. See who gets to the middle first. A crowd gathered. This probably takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely more in scene than the lines above. A crowd gathered probably takes a minute or two, and so we've got a sentence being like a minute or two. I put my hands on the first bar. This one doesn't take a lot of time. So here we're like getting really to scene work where like story time is the same as text time. Someone yelled, 1, 2, 3, go. This is literally like the dialogue, but it's still very much in scene. It's scene time. Text time is the same as story time. I was like a monkey. I knew I'd beat him easy, but I saw his eyes coming toward me and he looked scared. So this maybe she probably sees his eyes like really quickly. This is happening fast as they're going across the monkey bars, but it feels like she's dilating. The scene is getting a little bit slower. I slowed and we met in the middle at exactly the same moment. So here a moment is starting to take up space. And as a reader, we can feel that this moment is important because we've seen the writer slow down. You know, it started out with we met, I fell in love with Eddie on the school playground, and now we're in this particular moment. And as readers, because we've seen it slow down and go from summary to now, I would say this is dilation, I recognize that this feels more important. And so I'm starting to perk up and get invested. We hung there, both of us, long and lean. Again, it's a moment, it's dilation. He smiled and kissed me. Kisses at this age usually just happen really quickly, but it's like it's a whole sentence. All the kids screamed like crazy and sang dumb songs. We're picking up speed again. You know, how long did the kids scream like crazy and sing dumb songs? The speed has increased. It was one of the best moments of my life. Then we're looking back, it's summary. So in this example, we go from summary at the beginning to scene work in the dialogue, and then to dilation, and then back to summary at the end. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat. Um, do you want to see another example, or should I show you a published example? Let me show you another student example. This one is pretty similar. Um, yeah, I mean, this paragraph could have gone on longer, but I like what the writer does here because she's showing us this moment, and it's almost like microfiction in that like, this could be a very self-contained, super short story. It's only a couple hundred words. Um, and we could go on much longer with scene. An example from Raymond Carver would look like this. So here's a Raymond Carver story. This one's called Put Yourself in My Shoes. It's about this guy with a vacuum cleaner. So the telephone rang while he was running the vacuum cleaner. He had worked his way through the apartment and was doing the living room. He went to answer the telephone. Hello, he said, Myers here. So the dialogue starts here, And basically, he stays in scene all the way through this conversation with his wife. And we've got like basically a few pages right off the bat of this story happening in scene. It's all dialogue. He's got bodies going on here. We can see him. Um, he rubbed his fingers across the glass and then began to write his name on the glass as he waited. You know, we've got scene stuff where we're seeing the character do actions and we're seeing the dialogue. And then they agree to meet at this bar. Why don't we meet at Voiles for a drink? Voiles, all right. All right, she said. I'll see you at Voiles. Say hello to Carl for me. I will. So a lot of writers would just leave off the scene here where they agree to meet at the bar and then just jump right to the bar. But Carver doesn't take us to the bar until way over here when Paula came in. She said, Merry Christmas. So what he does instead is stay in the scene, show him leaving the house and putting the vacuum cleaner away. He walked down the 2 flights and went to his car, which was in the last stall and covered with snow. He's staying in scene even after the so called important stuff in the dialogue, them deciding to meet at the bar, has ended. And why does he do that? He does that to show the character doing things, and that helps us understand this is the kind of place that he lives in. This is how his car works. He needs to work the pedal a few times to get it to start. There's snow, and then there's a gap. So here's a section break. He kept the pedal down, and then as he drove, he looked at the people who hurried along. So the gap there isn't so big. It's pretty small. He's gone from starting the car to him driving. And the upside there is that there's so little in between those two that it really enables us to assume and figure out basically he started driving and there's not much that we're missing there. So there's a gap and we see that through the space break, but there's really very little that's happened in the gap. And as a reader, I can figure out what happened pretty easy. There's not a lot of important stuff that I'm missing or I'm not working to figure out what I assume happened. Then he drove, so he's driving. He looked at the people who hurried along the sidewalks with shopping bags. We show him going to the bar. He's a writer, so part of what this story is about his writing process. He tried to see everything, save it for later. He was between stories and he felt despicable. He found Voiles, a small bar on a corner next to a men's clothing store. This is also summary, but it's a slower version of summary that's closer to scene work. Does that make sense to you guys? He parked him back and went inside. Here's one sentence that covers probably a minute or two. When we get to the place where we're back in scene and in dialogue, Merry Christmas, he held a chair for her. This is a lot slower. So see how he ends off the summary piece. He sat at the bar for a time and then carried a drink over to a little table near the door. So this sentence probably covers maybe 5 minutes. And then this one, Merry Christmas. He got up and gave her a kiss on the cheek. He held a chair for her. Now we're back to the place where scene time is effectively like story time. Yeah, the more you stay in the moment, the more real the story feels. And so I'll just go back to what I was saying earlier is that for a lot of writers, they spend a lot of time in summary, sometimes because they don't realize that that's what they're doing. They want to keep going fast because they think that's how the reader is going to get invested. But you need to slow down some to get the reader invested to start writing in scene. And that's where the reader writer connection will really happen. And the reader starts to care about the characters and the reader starts to co-create the story with you. And that's when things can get really exciting. Does that make sense? And I know that not everybody is going to love that Carver story. Seems like a lot of people these days are not so hot on Carver, and maybe that's not the best Carver story, but I do think Raymond Carver is great. There's other examples that I could show you, but I wanted to see if if that stuff is coming across, and then we could look at other examples, or I could answer questions, or we could look at some examples from your writing. Yeah, absolutely. Summary leads to telling and not showing. You know, part of what I deal with in my class is that everybody tells you show, don't tell, but it's hard to understand what telling means. And one of the ways that you can think about it is this scene method and recognizing when you're in summary, because the pacing there might be easier to diagnose than whether you're telling or not. Sometimes telling or showing can be sort of an abstract concept. Yeah, I find I use summary and dialogue. The thing about that is that dialogue is a great opportunity for readers to connect with the character because that's the only time that your character and your reader are basically one to one. Like there's no filter between your reader and your character when you're using dialogue. Your reader gets to hear what your character is saying or hear what the character is hearing. I'm looking at some of the things in the Q&A. Uh, so I see questions coming up about the balance between summary, scene, and dilation pause. Um, I see questions about how to end the chapter. I think fundamentally, there's a lot of questions that are coming up. And the thing that I really recognize a lot when I start to see early writing is that writers are in summary a lot more than they think. But let's take a look at some of your examples and we will see if people are in scene or summary. So somebody who's brave, post a piece in the chat or in the Q&A, which is better, that has a paragraph or a few sentences where you really think that you're in scene, where you're showing characters doing things and you're really working in summary. I mean, sorry, in scene. Also, I'm going to put the link to get the resources for this and get signed up to my newsletter in the chat now, in case you want to see it. Um, Here's a piece by Bonnie that she Bonnie was working with me, and here's a piece that she did that's in scene. We'll take a look at this, and then we'll look at some of the other examples. I see examples by Heaven and Claire. So that's great. Thanks. And Kaylee has got something else. Um, let's look at this one from Bonnie. I handed Steve his ice cream as I grasped my cone in my left hand. The ice cream was already softening. I maneuvered the car to a nearby parking space and turned off the engine. So there's three sentences here. Which sentence has the fastest pace? Can you guys tell? I opened the windows and let the breeze drift in. I detected a floral fragrance. It mingled with the sweetness of the waffle cone. We sat, gazing outside, absorbing events of the last 7 hours. So this one could be kind of fast. We don't know how long they're sitting, gazing outside. This could be 10 minutes. And then this one, I wrapped my mouth around the top of the cone, savoring the coffee flavor, then wiped my mouth with a napkin. That's probably 10 seconds or less. So remember, if we think about our ratio and we're thinking about scene time versus or story time versus text time, that's what we're tracking here. And so in this sentence, story time is similar to page time, text time. I turned on the oldies station. What are you thinking? Steve stared ahead. I don't know what to think. Then we're in dialogue. Good. Wow, we're getting a lot of examples coming in. Let me go back to one of the early ones that popped in. I'm going to go back to Claire. Early ones get extra points for bravery. Here's Claire. It's 16 years since I promised myself I'd never go back to Hinton Crawford, but here I am on the twice a day country bus I haven't taken since I was a teenager. So this is summary, right? She's catching us up. She's giving us a bunch of information that we could call telling, and ideally what she's doing is setting up the scene. Soon I'll break a second vow too, but I don't see that coming yet. So this is kind of in scene, but it feels like this character is looking ahead to the future. So I'm not sure about what the text time is here or what the story time is. I'm half in denial about the first, even with the ticket crushed in my fist, even as every other possible destination vanishes from, even as the road shrinks. So this is still summary. I would say this is summary. Half in denial, I don't know how much time is taking place there. I don't know how much story time that is. And every other possible destination vanishes. This is probably multiple double digit minutes. And then 20 minutes away, I can't estimate time, but this comes to me like muscle memory. Every contour of the landscape is hardwired into my nerves and they are screaming. The nerves are screaming. Maybe that's like a similar text time to story time, but I don't know how long the nerves are screaming for. So here I would say I'm unclear on story time or text time, but this feels a lot like summary. And so, Claire, this is great that you give us this example because this shows a lot of what I see in writers who are starting out is that they think they're in scene, but it's more like summary, partly because I really don't know how much time has passed in these sentences, but it definitely seems like more than a few minutes. Let's look at another one by Heaven. My heart was pounding through my chest. I don't know how much time that is. So rather than saying like my heart, we could say something like my heart pounded. If it's my heart pounded through my chest, it feels more immediate. It feels like it's happening in a specific moment. But when we say my heart was pounding through my chest, it's a different verb form, and it's a verb form that's showing that time is passing as this is going on. So when we say my heart was pounding through my chest, I don't know how much time has passed in that period. It could be 10 seconds, it could be a minute. My breath is getting louder and louder. Again, is getting is a verb form that's showing a passage of time. So I don't know how much time that is. We could say my breath got louder and louder. That seems like a little bit less time, but it's still like more time than we know. Same again with sweat dripped everywhere. My limbs were almost all swollen. A headache was forming. I gulped my water. So I gulp my water is the first sentence to me that feels like it's a specific incident where a writer is doing one specific thing. So let's note that down. Scene time when a character is doing one specific thing in a single specific moment. And this is great because when we start dealing with single specific moments in a story, we're able to create a rhythm and a chronology for readers. And that's when readers start to put together the pieces of time that make up a present storyline. So, this is my favorite line so far. I gulped my water. This feels like scene time. I could feel it cool my head. How much time does this one take? Could be 10 seconds, could be a minute. I don't know. So I'm putting the ones in italics that are where I don't know how much time is passing. And if you remember our ratio, if we don't know how much story time that is, we don't know what the pace is. So that's a place where we can get confused as writers. Am I in summary or am I in scene? And the fix is just to change the verbs so that it's single actions in single moments. Almost there, I told myself. Great, scene time, dialogue. The chilly night wind against my back felt so nice. Don't know. The rain was softly pouring. Don't know. My long raven black hair was everywhere. Everything was a blur. And then I stopped. Here's another singular moment. This is sort of the writer telling us that there's kind of an epiphany moment. This is almost the writer telling us the wind and rain started pouring more slowly. The rain drifted away. This is sort of like the writer telling us that I'm going into dilation, but it's not dilation because we still have sentences that are covering a fair amount of time. Slowly, the rain drifted away. What would it look like for the rain to drift away in more detail? A bit later, the fireflies emerged. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. This feels good. This feels like some emotion is coming through. But again, a lot of what's happening here is kind of summary. I started running back toward home. So it feels like by the end of this, by the end, there's some scene and hints of dilation, but really, this paragraph is mostly summary. Does that make sense? I don't want to scare anyone from volunteering. I'm picking these from the Q&A and I appreciate, oh, hey, Cheryl, nice to see you. Um, I'm glad that this is helpful. I really like going through people's work and I'm sorry if it feels like I hope I hope it doesn't feel like I'm being harsh on anyone. Um, let's look at another one. This one is by an anonymous person. Sorry if you're posting these in the chat and I'm pulling from the Q&A. Uh, After this one, I'll pull another one from the chat and then maybe we'll go to some real questions or just some questions. So here's another one. Gina glanced up from her BLT to find Ed staring at her. So this is a moment. This is in scene. Let me see if I can get this to be black. So this is a moment. This is in scene. She grabbed a napkin. What is it? Do I have mayonnaise on my chin? All of this is in scene. That's great. No, but you've got something on your mind. I do. Ed sat back in his chair, eyebrows raised. Do you see how this is different than saying something like Ed Ed was sitting back in his chair? Was sitting back in his chair is like multiple time units passing. Ed sat back in his chair, eyebrows raised. It makes me feel like I'm seeing Ed sit back in his chair, and that's a moment. The Middleburg Market lunch crowd buzzed around them. So this is back to summary. I don't know how long the buzzing is going on, but we're so close to scene that it's fine. We've got more dialogue. She smiled and grabbed a chip off Ed's plate, but said nothing. Great, love it. Something was bugging her, but he'd laugh if she told him. This is kind of interior. It was the guy at the gas and grub, the way he'd filled with his glasses. She's thinking here. I don't know how much time is going on here, but it feels like we're in her head we're getting her thoughts. Maybe this is somewhere between scene and dilation. It's interior. And I feel like I'm ready to go into some of Gina's interior because I've landed in the scene. I know where the characters are. I care about Gina because I know that she's a potato chip stealer and I know what she's saying to him. So I'm ready to go into her head and get it. The man was hiding something. I don't know that they're cops until I read this line. Their radios crackled to life. Now I think they're cops. Crap, it was Bob, the midday dispatcher. Maybe she's got a theory going on, or maybe they're just cab drivers and they're wondering. Never fails, Ed said. It had been quiet all morning. Of course, they're getting into a good conversation, and then it busts out. So that is probably 3 or 4 examples from the group. Um, Let me just check in with you guys. There's a lot of other examples that people have put up, and I really appreciate this. Um, but let me know in the chat or the Q&A, do you have questions now? Do you want me to answer questions, or do you want me to do a couple more of these? I should also say thank you very much to those who have volunteered. Really good. Questions, couple more. Uh, if you have a question, put that in the chat, and I'll do that, and then I'll find another one to do. Brenna has one. I think it's it. So the one that I just did here, that was the one that I just did here was third person point of view, limited. So we covered third person point of view. Um, we got first person here with this one. We've got first person with Bonnie, and then first person here. Thanks, Bridget. Let's see. Q&A. Yeah, when to use summary to prevent the story from. I'll just take a couple more questions and then do another example. I'm seeing people wanting questions, but I'm only seeing like 1 or 2 questions and then a lot of examples. Third person is fine. It all works the same for third person, and I can do another one like that. Um, so the question that I'm seeing is when to use summary to prevent story from being way too long. The answer there is, once you know that you're working in scene, you want to build your story out of scenes. And honestly, I would tell you all to stay in scene longer than you think you need to. There's a blog post that I wrote on my website, right with Seth, on the blog and on my Substack about the Beehive event or the Beehive assignment, which is good in terms of making you think about keeping your characters in the tension scene longer. But yeah, what I would say is stay in scene as long as you can. Do that, knowing that when you write good long scenes, you can always cut them back later in revision. But I feel like scene work is when you really get to understand and learn about your characters and your story. So staying in scene, pushing yourself to stay in scene, that's when the really good work is going to happen to develop the story and develop the characters and develop that reader connection. When you feel like you've ended a scene, then you can use summary to jump to the next event, or you can use gap, or you should use summary and gap. But one of the things that I see coming up in a lot of the questions also is like, when do I use flashback, or when do I use gap or summary, or I have a lot of flashbacks, or I have a lot of scenes. Here's a really important thing that I'm going to write down. I'm writing this down. I want you to see this, so I'm going to write it down here. So, your goal as a writer is to stay in scene a lot of the time, and transitions are when you jump out of scene to go to another scene. And we're conditioned through watching television, through our our experience with television, um, let's see. Yeah, we get a lot from television where we're jumping out of scene a lot. Like on TV, things are constantly popping out of scene. Things are constantly changing around. And so, oh, no, hold on. Okay, good. We're good. Um, oh, I see. You got to bring me to the front. Get me back up there. Oh, well. Um, sorry, I'm getting distracted. Um, when we watch TV, we see a lot of transitions between scenes. Scene transitions happen a lot. And so in fiction, it's important to recognize that if we have as many transitions as we do in TV and we're used to in TV, it's going to all miss the reader. And even if you're in scene, if you're jumping scenes a lot, it's still a lot of transitions and it's a lot for a reader to connect with. So, what I would say here is um, don't do transitions that much. Stay in scene is your goal and avoid doing transitions to different different time, POV, or setting more than once every 2 pages. This is a total general rule, and it take it with many grains of salt, but I think it's an important thing to think about is that your transitions, what you have, these are the things that are going to make it feel like your reader is hopping back and forth between too many scenes. And because we're working in fiction or memoir, we need to land the reader in that moment in time, in that place in time, and that takes some work. So it takes a while to establish that in scene, and that's what we need to do. So use summary in between the scenes that are important to you, and then move back into scene when you want to connect with the reader for the new thing. I see a bunch of people saying, can you please look at my piece? If you send me an email, I'll put my email in the chat and I can do a couple of these. Um, if you email it to me. Um, but, or I can probably check them out in the summer camp community. Um, but Bridget, why don't you come back and give me some help on where I should go with questions and other things like that.
Absolutely. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Perfect. I have a little external mic, so hopefully everyone can hear me a little bit better. But yeah, let's take a look at the Q&A. So if you have any other questions, please add them there. I feel like some of these you've already touched on. Let's see. Um, Sita said, "How could you use pacing to make your story longer?"
Yeah. I mean, I think fundamentally, I see writers coming to me with stories that are too short because they're in summary. And if you really start to work in scene, your story is going to get longer. So, two ways that you can make your story longer by using pacing: one is to get more in scene, and two is to stay in your scenes longer instead of jumping. I was saying try not to do transitions more than once every 2 pages. The thing about transitions, I'm frustrated because on this slide I seem to have lost my own video, and that's what I got all worked up about or confused about. But whatever. So if I look at this slide, um, if your goal is to stay in scene and transitions are where you jump out of scene, the two ways that you can transition are with gap or summary, but don't do this too often because if you do this too often, the reader can't kind of land in the scene. So the reader staying in scene, that's when you really start to connect with readers. So avoid doing transitions more than once every 2 pages, which is a total random, like, um, very broad general rule. So don't take offense at that. But I think it's helpful if you try not to do that because the places where writers get in trouble and lose readers is when they have transitions that they don't realize that they're making. Like you go into flashback or you transition into summary and you don't realize that you were doing that. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Seth. Another question from Lynn. Um, should we be going through every single scene in our novels and working through summary, scene, dilation in every scene?
Um, I think in general, the move to make as you're working as writers is to start recognizing when you're writing in scene. And I can help you with that. And my course on Udemy can help you with that. And if you go to a website link that I'm going to put in the chat right now, I'm running a special summer deal on the Udemy course where it is um, at a lower price for summer. So if you guys want to check this out, I'll put this link in the website, or I'll put this link in the chat. If you sign up for the content, you'll get this link and you'll get a coupon. But if you use this link now to check out the Udemy course, the Show Don't Tell web sales page on my website, there's a special deal where on Udemy the price is normally 197. I usually sell the class for 147, and right now I'm selling it for 127 for the summer limited summer rate. So check it out, and if you're interested, there's also ways that you can sign up for feedback through that course, and I'm happy to show you. But essentially, this course is a 4 module series of videos and assignments that helps you recognize how to slow down and get your writing into scene more. And then the goal is, um, don't worry so much about dilation and summary right now. What you really want to do is just start to get your stuff into scene consistently so that you're writing individual moments in time and creating a narrative series of events that the reader can connect with.
Thanks, Seth.
Here's the link to the course.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions. I have one from Brooke here. Do you have thoughts about how to know when to end the scene?
I mean, that's a hard one because it's so individual. Some people really want scenes that are cliffhanger. Some people want scenes that go on longer so that you can reach an emotional climax. Generally, for me, when I'm writing my thrillers, I try to keep my chapters around 1,500 words. That was just a rough thing, and I would try to end scenes in a place where it left the reader wanting more. Um, wait, that link's not right. Sorry. It left the reader wanting more. And so, depending on what kind of book that you're writing, like Carver is taking his scenes longer because he's writing literary fiction. He's trying to get to more of an emotional connection with readers. Um, and if you're writing romance or you're writing uh, science fiction or um, another genre, you might want your scenes to be faster. But it is kind of an intuition thing, as some of you guys are saying. Yeah, it depends on genre.
I have another question, quite a few questions. We won't get to all of them, so apologies, everyone. Thank you for sharing all of your work, being brave. Thank you so much, Seth. But maybe one more question from Audrey. When you're writing a scene, how do you know what's gone on one beat too long? What signals tell you it's time to, yeah, to end the scene, which is similar to you were just saying. It depends.
Yeah, I think that, you know, be conscious of when you're writing a first draft. And when you're drafting, your goal is to make pages. Your goal is to make the clay that you're going to carve a story out of later when you're in revision. So the drafting process is really sort of a learning phase. You're learning about your story, you're learning about your characters. So I would encourage you to go on one beat too long. Go on longer than you think you should, and then that's going to give you stuff to cut later, but you will learn more about your characters and your stories. So I would say when you're writing a scene and you're drafting, push yourself to go a little bit longer, Audrey. And that will help out in revision and help you in creating a better story. And you can give yourself more kudos at the end of the day because you'll have written more words, and that's really the goal in drafting. But yeah, it's kind of a feeling and an intuition when you feel like what needed to happen in the scene is over and you want to sort of pop ahead. And I would say sometimes just push against that intuition, take it in, feel it, and sometimes sort of push against it a little bit, test it out, and see what happens.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seth. And thank you, everyone here, for spending some time with us today. Seth has a QR code there if you want to stay in touch. But yeah, thank you for our very first Nav Camp workshop. Thank you again, Seth, for generously spending your time with us. We'll see you all in the community or future events.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Bye, all.